wind howls across the mist-shrouded fens, carrying the sharp tang of smoke from distant thatched roofs curling into the gray sky. You hear at first a low rumble, like thunder trapped in the earth, growing into the thunder of hooves and iron-shod boots. Then the screams pierce through, raw and jagged, as shadows resolve into shapes. Legionaries in polished lorica, their shields locked in a wall that advances like a living beast. In the heart of the chaos, a woman stands atop a chariot, her red hair unbound, whipping like flames in the gale. Her voice rises above the din, fierce as a blade. We fight for our daughters, our homes, our blood. But the line breaks, spears flash. The earth drinks deep. And in that moment, as the first Iceni fall, you glimpse the machine awakening not just soldiers, but an empire's cold calculus of control. This tale pulls no punches. It weaves through rebellion and reprisal, touching on violations that scarred generations. These are echoes from ancient chroniclers, grim but real. If the weight pulls too heavy, pause here. For those who press on, we chase not the gore, but the gears that ground tribes to dust. Imagine a drizzle-soft island on the edge of a vast sea empire, where iron-forged legions had clawed their way ashore nearly 2 decades prior. It was the 60th year of the Roman calendar, under the distant gaze of Emperor Nero, when the province of Britannia simmered like a pot left too long on the fire. Rome had come not as guests, but as architects, redrawing maps with roads and forts, taxing the air itself. The Celts' fierce folk of painted skin and sacred groves had bent, but not broken. Alliances formed like fragile webs, client kings swearing fealty, trading torques for temporary peace. This wasn't chaos born of mad ambition. This was a machine, oiled by tribute and terror. Rome's grip tightened through governors like the steely-eyed Suetonius Paulinus, a man whose name evoked the unyielding edge of a gladius. He prowled the frontiers, subduing druids on Mona, that misty isle of mistletoe and rebellion. But the heartlands, the fertile east where the Iceni roamed, held a different pulse. Their king, Prasutagus, had played the game well, ally to Caesar, father to 2 daughters, husband to a queen whose spirit burned brighter than any hearth fire. Boudicca, they called her, the victory bringer, tall and tawny-haired, her presence a storm wrapped in deerskin. The reframe hits hard. This wasn't a fairy tale of noble savages versus enlightened conquerors. This was erasure by ledger lands seized, loans called in, bodies bartered like grain. Prasutagus died that spring, his will a desperate bid for legacy, half his wealth to Rome, half to his girls, with Boudicca as guardian. But the Procurator Decianus Catus, a oily financier with ink-stained fingers, saw opportunity. He ignored the parchment, declared the kingdom forfeit. Roman agents swarmed the oppidum at Venta Icenorum, stripping nobles of gold, flogging the proud, and then the unspeakable. Boudicca, dragged before them, lashed until her back wept red. Her daughters, barely flowered into womanhood, cornered in the shadows of their own hall, violated by men who wore the eagle as license. Word spread like fever through the reed-thatched villages. This wasn't justice. This was the machine flexing, reminding all that client meant captive. Boudicca, bloodied but unbowed, gathered her kin under ancient oaks. "They have taken our honor," she said, her voice a gravel rasp from the whip's kiss. "We take theirs." Allies flocked the Trinovantes, seething over their own grievances, their lands pawned for Seneca's usury. Within days, a host swelled to 100,000, faces streaked with woad, spears tipped with hate. Camulodunum fell first, that smug veteran colony built on plundered Trinovante soil, no quarter given. The 9th Legion, caught marching to aid, hacked to ribbons in the woods. Women of Rome, once mistresses of the conquered, now impaled in groves sacred to Andraste, their screams a hymn to vengeance. But pause here. Amid the ash-choked air, a lone druid, robes singed at the hem, slips through the smoke to gather herbs by a stream untouched by flame. He chews a bitter leaf, spits into the current, whispering to the gods who seem to have turned their backs. In that quiet bend, where minnows dart like forgotten hopes, the world breathes. The machine grinds on, but even it tires. Suetonius Paulinus, far to the west, receives the raven's message in his camp on Mona's bloodied shore. His face, carved from Punic stone, hardens. This man born to consular blood, tempered in Mauritania's sands, was no brute poet like Nero's courtiers. He was precision incarnate, a general who measured victory in miles of pacified frontier. Formed in the crucible of frontier wars, where mercy meant mutiny, he had learned early, hesitation invites the spear. As a young tribune, he'd watched his father's allies fall to Parthian arrows, vowing never to yield ground. Later, in Africa's dust, he'd quelled revolts with calculated cruelty, promoting men who delivered heads on pikes. Paranoia? No. Prudence. Rome's borders frayed like old linen, one loose thread, and the empire unraveled. The turning point came swift as a flung pilum. Paulinus abandons Mona, marches south with 14,000 hardened souls, the 14th and 20th legions, eagles gleaming. He sends couriers ahead. Raise what resists, spare none who took arms. Boudicca's horde, drunk on early triumphs, turns south toward Londinium, that muddy trading post swelling into a provincial hub. They find it ripe, perhaps 10,000 souls, merchants from Gaul, families of officials, a scattering of auxiliaries. The queen's chariots roll in at dawn, the earth trembling under wheels bound with iron. Fires bloom like deadly flowers, consuming timber halls, the new basilica's beams cracking in the heat. Screams rise in a cacophony. Children clutch to breasts, men barring doors with market carts. The Iceni pour through, axes singing, their fury a tide that drowns the streets in red. You can almost taste it, the acrid bite of burning pitch, the metallic tang of fierce sweat. A Roman matron, silks torn, flees toward the bridge, her infant wailing. Behind her, a warrior with torque of twisted bronze closes the gap, his blade arcing. She stumbles, turns, pleads in broken Celtic, but the machine's shadow looms. This is no personal grudge. It's the calculus of terror, one life to cow 1,000. The child falls silent first, then her. Across the forum, sacred to Neptune and Minerva, the desecrators feast, their laughter echoing off charred walls. Dio's chronicles whisper of noblewomen skewered, breasts severed in mockery of fertility rites, acts that twist the gut, even in ink faded by centuries. Boudicca, from her vantage on a hillock, surveys the pyre. Her daughters, shadows at her side, eyes hollowed by memory, clutch hare's foot amulets for luck. For every lash, she murmurs, a city burns, but the breath catches. In the lee of a toppled statue, Caesar's stern gaze cracked like an egg. A tiny girl, no more than 16 summers, kneels by her fallen brother. She traces his tattooed arm, the serpents coiling eternal, and hums a lullaby of reed boats on summer fens. The smoke curls around her like a shawl, softening the horror for one stolen heartbeat. Beauty in the breach, a reminder that even machines leave gaps. The escalation shifts north, to Verulamium, the Catuvela Uni heartland. Paulinus's scouts report the horde's path, a serpent of wagons and woad-streaked faces, 200,000 strong by boast, though truth leans slimmer. The general halts his columns in a narrow defile, the Watling Street's banks steep as judgment. He pens a dispatch to Nero. The rebels scatter like chaff. We shall reap. Incentives flow down the chain, land grants for the loyal, double pay for the vanguard. Centurions bark orders, forming the testudo, shields overlapping like scales on a dragon's back. Auxiliaries from Batavia, their spears poisoned with resentment, grumble but obey. The system hums. Reports from spies in Iceni villages, tallied in wax tablets, quartermasters doling grain to keep the march relentless. From a Batavian archer's perch, you watch the Britons advance. Their war cries roll like waves, chariots flinging dust, devils skyward. Women mingle with warriors, slinging stones from leather pouches, their ululations a banshee wail. One figure stands out, a Trinovante widow, her husband's cloak draped like a banner, leading a knot of kin with pitchforks forged to kill. She hurls a rock that clips a legionary's helm, drawing blood and a curse. But the volley answers. Pila arc high, then plunge, skewering the unwary. The widow charges, eyes locked on an eagle-bearer, her cry a guttural vow. She falls mid-stride, shaft through the throat, her cloak pooling crimson. No glory in the telling, just the grind, whole kin groups trampled, villages emptied like husks after harvest. A breather steals in, ironic as a raven's caw. Paulinus, in his tent that eve, pores over a map unrolled on a shield. A slave pours Falernian wine, the vintage Nero's gift, its bouquet clashing with the fen's damp rot. The general chuckles dryly at a dispatch. Boudicca's seers predict victory from a hair's path. "Let them chase shadows," he mutters. Outside, a piper plays for the wounded, a lilting tune from the Rhine that speaks of home fires unquenched. For a moment, the machine pauses, men, human in the firelight, sharing tales of lost brothers. But dawn breaks, and the wedge drives forward. The climax unfurls in that fatal gorge, the air thick as porridge with tension. Boudicca's host funnels in, a river of flesh hemmed by unyielding earth. Chariots jam, warriors press shoulder to spear, the rear blind to the trap. Paulinus signals trumpets blare, a brazen roar that splits the din. The legions surge, not in wild charge, but measured slaughter. Front ranks pinning, flanks curling like wolves on a stag. Time stretches, each heartbeat a drum. You feel the crush, the press of bodies, the slick slide of entrails underfoot, the gasps of the dying mingling with war cries turned to pleas. Boudicca, chariot-mired, lashes her team to frenzy. Her daughters, beside her, wield sickles stained with Roman blood. "Hold!" she bellows, voice cracking like thunder. But the tide turns, a pilum finds a wheel, splinters fly. The queen staggers, hair matted with sweat and gore, as auxiliaries close the noose. No graphic plunge of steel here, just the implication, the machine's inexorable close. 80,000 Iceni perish, by day's end, Tacitus tallies, though numbers blur in the haze of ancient grudge. Women fight to the last, cradling kin, children vanish under hooves. Boudicca, wounded or poisoned chronicles, waver, slips away to a quiet copse, her final breath a curse on the eagle. The crack appears not in flesh, but in the aftermath's echo. Paulinus overreaches. Nero, spooked by the near loss of a province, recalls him in disgrace. The governor's triumph curdles to exile, his machine dented by imperial whim. Boudicca's body, unclaimed, becomes legend's seed whispered in British halls, fueling future fires. The Iceni scatter, their name fading to a civitas shadow, Venta Icenorum, a ghost town of Roman tile and Celtic sorrow. In the weeks that follow, the machine recalibrates. Paulinus's successor, Petronius Turpilianus, mops the remnants, villages razed, fields salted not with tears but neglect. Families not spared, Tacitus notes the sale of captives into slavery, thousands shipped to Gaul's markets or Rome's arenas. Boudicca's daughters vanished to history's margins, perhaps bartered as trophies, their fates a silent scream. The Procurator Catus flees to Gaul, his ledgers balanced in blood. Nero, ever the artist, pens odes to stability, but the province simmers, taxes hike to rebuild what flames devoured. Power shifts subtly. The east, once Boudicca's blaze, quiets under heavier garrisons. Long-term, Britannia's wall marches north, Hadrian's stone a scar on the land. Ironic twist. The very roads that sped Paulinus's vengeance now bind the empire, turning foes to farmers within a generation. The Iceni's torques melt into denarii, their gods to corner shrines. Yet the machine, for all its grind, births its own fracture, revolts like this one whispering that control is illusion, bought with ever more spears. Centuries bury the fens under plow and perish, until the 19th summer of Victoria's reign, when a Norfolk laborer unearths a hoard near Hockwold, golden torques, coiled like serpents, etched with Iceni swirls. Charles Roach Smith, that dogged antiquarian with ink-smudged cuffs, catalogues them in his London parlor, pipe smoke curling like battlefield mist. Proof, he scribbles, of Queen's unbroken, later digs at Venta Icenorum Street. Edmund's trenches yielding pottery shards, a brooch bent in flight paint the picture. A people who traded amber for iron, dreamed in runes, resisted till the end. No mass grave of 20,000. Mind historians debate the toll. Tacitus's 80,000, likely puffed with Roman pride, but enough bones to stir the soil. Why does this echo now? Picture a modern frontier, where drones hum over contested sands, algorithms tallying strikes like wax tablets once did. Boudicca's stand teaches not glory in the charge, but the cost of the ledger. When power logs lives as lines, resistance isn't madness, it's math. It reveals human nature's core resilience forged in violation. systems that devour their own to survive. Universal as the wind over fens, crush one spark, and embers wait in the thatch. Return to that misted field, where the rumble fades to silence. The chariots lie splintered, eagles perch on bloodied standards, but Boudicca's voice lingers, carried on the breeze. They sought to unmake us. We endure. Her daughter's amulets, perhaps clutched in some forgotten grave, gleam against the dark. The Iceni were meant to vanish tribes, dissolved, names to footnotes. But they didn't. They live in the torques on museum shelves, the streets named for a queen in London stone, the stories you carry now. Because you chose to listen, the machine's hum falters, just a little. If this fire stirred something in you, drop a comment below. What ancient revolt calls to you next? Your words keep these tales alive.